The studio was already tense before the cameras even turned on. You could feel it in the way the crew moved fast but careful, like they were stepping over glass. The anchors shuffled their cards again and again, trying to look calm, but failing. A producer behind the main camera waved his hand in tight circles, signaling to speed it up. The red light wasn't on yet, but it was close. Everyone knew something big might go down tonight. The air felt heavier than usual, like everyone was waiting for a spark. This wasn't just any political show. It was a live town hall broadcast, straight from Dallas, Texas, and going out on every major news network at once. The kind of event where nothing is scripted, where anything can happen, and usually does. The format was simple. 2 sides, 1 table, no teleprompters, and no breaks. On one side sat Donald Trump, the former president, flanked by 2 conservative commentators. He looked exactly like you'd expect, confident, leaning back in his chair, already cracking his knuckles like he was ready for a fight. The crowd on his side clapped loudly even before the show began. Across the table, a small group of Democratic reps were seated. Among them was Jasmine Crockett. She wasn't saying much. Her hands were folded in front of her. She wasn't shifting in her seat. No fake smiles, just quiet focus. She watched everything, every camera move, every smirk from the other side, but didn't react. It wasn't her first time in a room like this, but it felt different. She wasn't here for show. She was here because someone had to be. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3, lights on. Mic's hot. The host introduced the panel. Questions flew. Stats were thrown. Voices got louder. Trump talked over people. The crowd laughed. Jasmine still hadn't spoken. 35 minutes in, the heat was rising. They were deep into a debate. About leadership, about who had failed the country and who could still fix it. Trump leaned forward. He wasn't looking at the host. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking straight at Jasmine. Then he said it. Maybe if some of these young politicians stopped trying to go viral and started learning their place, we wouldn't be in such a mess. He didn't say her name, but he didn't have to. The room went quiet for a second. You could hear someone shifting in their seat, a laugh forced uneasy from the back row. One of the moderators started to speak, maybe trying to move things along, but Jasmine raised her hand slowly, stopping everything. Her expression didn't change. Her eyes didn't blink. And that's where everything started to turn. Jasmine didn't rush. She didn't raise her voice. She just sat up straighter, looked directly at Trump and said, "Mr. Trump, I know you're used to people clapping for nonsense, but respect isn't given based on age or title. It's earned. And given your record, you might want to sit this one out." Her voice didn't shake. Her face didn't move. It was steady, like she'd been waiting her whole life to say those exact words, not for attention. But because it needed to be said, the room stopped. Everything, the audience, the cameras, even the background noise seemed to vanish. It felt like the whole building had paused to breathe. Someone in the front actually whispered, "Whoa," just loud enough for the mic to catch it. A few people looked at each other, unsure if they were supposed to laugh, clap, or sit frozen. Even the moderators looked shocked, like they didn't have anything in their notes for this kind of moment. One of the crew members behind the camera dropped his pen. That sound, soft as it was, echoed more than it should have. Trump didn't say anything at first. He blinked a few times, leaned back in his chair, then let out a low chuckle as he reached for his water. But there was no quick reply, no smart comeback. For the first time that night, he looked a little off balance. Not embarrassed, just thrown. And that made the moment hit even harder. Because if there's one thing Trump is never short on, it's words. And now, he had none. The audience didn't roar. They didn't boo. They just stared. Some with their mouths slightly open. Others glancing at their neighbors like, did that really just happen? Even the people who disagreed with her couldn't deny it. Something had landed. Something real. The cameras, always rolling, caught every detail. Her tone, his silence, the looks exchanged. Within seconds, it was already being clipped by producers and sent to newsrooms across the country. On social media, people were scrambling to post it before it hit the news. It wasn't just a political moment. It was a cultural one. The kind of thing people remember not because it was loud, but because it was sharp, calm, true. Back on stage, Jasmine didn't smile. She didn't raise an eyebrow or look for approval. She just folded her hands again and went back to listening. Like she hadn't just shaken the room. Like this was just another Tuesday. But it wasn't, not anymore. The moment Jasmine Crockett spoke those words, the internet caught fire. Within minutes, clips of her response were all over TikTok, X, Instagram, and YouTube. No one needed context. The video spoke for itself, her calm voice, Trump's silence, that single frozen second where the room didn't know what to do. Someone added dramatic music behind it and posted it with the caption, "The moment Gen Z entered the room." Another video zoomed in on Trump's reaction, pausing right when he leaned back and blinked like he'd just been slapped with the truth. The hashtag sit this one out was trending before the show even ended. By 6 a.m., the clip had already crossed 11 million views. It wasn't just political accounts sharing it, comedy pages, sports pages, meme pages. Even teenagers who didn't usually care about Congress were reposting it with captions like, "She's her," or "This is how you handle a bully." People started syncing her words to songs. One edit turned her line into a beat drop. Another cut between her and famous movie characters known for their savage lines, like Katniss Everdeen or Eleven from Stranger Things. It didn't matter if you were left or right. Everyone was watching it. The news picked it up fast. CNN ran the full exchange in slow motion with a panel breaking down the tone of her voice. MSNBC called it one of the most powerful moments in recent live television. Even Fox News played the clip, though they edited it tight and immediately brought on a guest who called her disrespectful and immature. Still, they couldn't ignore it. None of them could. Every talk show, every political podcast, every morning radio host had something to say. Late-night shows made it part of their opening monologues. One host joked, "Trump finally met a wall. He couldn't talk over," and Jasmine, she didn't say a word. No tweet, no follow-up post, no interviews. Her accounts were quiet, her phone stayed off. While the world reacted, riposted, debated, and dissected, she stayed completely silent. That silence didn't cool things down. It made the moment louder. People started filling in their own thoughts. Was she holding back on purpose? Was she planning something bigger? Was this just the beginning? Friends called. Her team was overwhelmed. Reporters camped outside her district office. Former classmates who hadn't spoken to her in years were now sending long messages that started with, "I saw the clip and just wanted to say." It was like the whole country had been waiting for someone to say what she said, and when she did, it hit a nerve. A deep one. Not everyone liked it, of course. Some called it rude. Some accused her of doing it for clout. Some edited the video to make her look like she was attacking, cutting out Trump's comment entirely. The hate came fast too. Emails, angry posts from burner accounts. But even in that noise, there was something different. You could tell the tone had shifted. People weren't just arguing about politics anymore. They were arguing about tone, power, place who gets to speak, and how. And through it all, Jasmine stayed quiet. But the country didn't. It kept spinning. Louder and louder. She hadn't planned to start a storm. She just answered a moment. And somehow, that answer became bigger than anything anyone expected before she ever sat across from Donald Trump on live TV. Before the viral clip or the news headlines, Jasmine Crockett was just a kid from Shreveport, Louisiana. Not famous. Not rich, just regular. Her mother was a nurse who pulled long night shifts, sometimes 2 in a row without complaining. Her father worked out of a small garage, fixing up cars one busted engine at a time. Money was always tight, but they never lied about it. They just worked. Jasmine grew up watching that kind of quiet strength every single day. Her parents didn't talk big about dreams, they just showed up, no matter how tired they were from a young age. Jasmine had this sharp sense of what was right and what wasn't. She wasn't the loudest kid in school, but if someone was lying or picking on someone else, she would speak up. One time, back in middle school, she got grounded not for breaking a rule, but for staying quiet when she knew someone else was lying. That lesson stuck with her. Silence sometimes was just another way of helping the wrong side win. By the time she was in high school, she'd already made up her mind. She wasn't going to be famous. She wasn't chasing money. She wanted to be a lawyer not because of TV shows or movie courtroom scenes, but because she wanted to be the person in the room who could say, "That's not right," and actually make it matter. She told a teacher during a civics class, "I want to help people who can't help themselves." The teacher nodded. Jasmine meant it. She got her degree from Rhodes College in Memphis, then went to law school at the University of Houston. While a lot of her classmates were aiming for big law firms and six-figure salaries, Jasmine went the other way. She spent her summers inside crowded courtrooms and overstuffed jails, working with criminal defense attorneys who took the cases no one else wanted. She stood next to clients who had been ignored for years, poor, broken, scared, and she didn't flinch. She listened. She fought. She wrote long briefs at 2 a.m. because if she didn't, no one else would. When she opened her own law practice, her reputation grew fast. Judges twice her age respected her. Other lawyers noticed the way she could break down a case so clearly that even a jury that didn't want to care couldn't help but feel something. She didn't yell. She didn't grandstand. She just spoke. Clearly, honestly, and with full confidence in what was right. Clients trusted her because she told them the truth even when it hurt. But Jasmine wasn't just a lawyer. She was an organizer. On weekends, she showed up at community centers and neighborhood forums. She knew the people in her district by name, the grandmothers who kept the block clean, the high schoolers trying to figure out their next step, the single moms working 2 jobs and still showing up for every parent meeting. She didn't talk at them. She stood beside them. And when a local representative stepped down in 2019, it wasn't some party insider who pushed her to run. It was the people. They said, "You already fight for us in court, why not do it in the House?" The political world didn't see her coming. She wasn't polished. She didn't have major donors backing her campaign. She was a 38-year-old black woman with a sharp memory and a sharp tongue. The experts said she couldn't win. She won by over 10 points. When she got to Austin, she didn't suddenly turn safe. She kept asking hard questions. She called out both sides when they tried to play it cute. She refused to clap for things that didn't deserve applause, even when it made people uncomfortable. Especially then. That's who Jasmine Crockett was long before a TV camera ever caught her in a viral moment. Not a politician built for sound bites. Not someone trained to smile while staying quiet. She was built in real places, shaped by late-night shifts, courtrooms, and hard truths. She never needed permission to speak. She just needed a reason. And when that moment came, she didn't perform. She remembered who she was. Back in Washington, everything looked normal on the surface. Same marble floors, same meetings, same forced smiles in hallways. But something had changed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. It was the kind of shift you feel when people stop looking you in the eye. Jasmine Crockett walked through the Capitol like she always did, head up, notes in hand, but the energy around her was different now. Some colleagues who used to nod or say a quick hello now kept their eyes on their phones when she passed. Others gave her tight smiles, the kind that didn't reach their eyes. No one said anything out loud, but the silence had weight. In meetings, it was the same. She spoke up like she always had, calm and focused, but she could feel it, the way the room tensed when her voice entered the conversation. Some people leaned back in their chairs. Some scribbled notes just to avoid looking up. When she made a strong point, no one pushed back, but no one supported her either. It was like her words just floated in the air, too heavy for anyone to catch. It wasn't anger. It was something colder - caution. By the second day back, her chief of staff, Leonard, got word of a meeting. Not on the official schedule, no aides allowed. Room 240, just a few senior members from her own party. Jasmine didn't ask what it was about. She already knew. After her vote on a minor infrastructure bill, she made her way down the long hallway. Alone, the building was quiet. Inside the room were 6 people, all older, all powerful. They didn't waste time. "We just wanted to talk," one of them said, trying to sound casual. No pressure, just ... Checking in. At first, they danced around the topic, talked about unity, tone, the importance of staying focused. Then one of them leaned in and said, "Look, you've got the spotlight now. People are watching. That means responsibility." That moment on. Live TV, it hard, maybe too hard. The party needs less heat right now. Another one followed up, softer, "You're sharp." No one's denying that. But managing the temperature matters too. We can't afford division. Jasmine sat still, listening. She didn't nod, she didn't interrupt. When they finally paused, she spoke slow, measured. "Are you asking me to walk it back?" One of them, a man who'd been in office since the 90s, gave a half smile. "Not exactly, we're just saying choose your moments. You don't want to burn through them too fast." She looked around the room, then said quietly, "I wasn't given a mic. I took it because no one else was saying what needed to be said." No one replied right away. There was a long pause. One woman looked down at her notepad. Another took a slow sip of coffee. The message was clear. They didn't want to silence her. They just didn't know what to do with her now that she had people's attention. Jasmine stood, thanked them for their time, and walked out. She didn't slam the door. She didn't roll her eyes. But as she stepped into the hallway, she knew this wasn't just about politics anymore. This was about place. About how power moves when someone who's not supposed to speak up suddenly does and says it plainly. The game had changed, and the people who'd been writing the rules weren't ready to admit it. Not yet. The attention didn't take long to turn dark. At first, it was just a few angry comments online, people calling Jasmine names, twisting her words, accusing her of being disrespectful. But then it got worse. A staffer noticed a man sitting in a truck outside their district office. He wasn't yelling or holding a sign. He was just sitting there, staring at the building. When someone went out to ask what he was doing, he said, "Just making sure she's safe," then drove off. The police ran the plates. Out of state, no warrants, nothing they could hold him for. But the image stayed. Then came the envelope. No stamp, no return address. Just dropped off at the mailroom in D.C. like it belonged there. Inside was a torn-out page from Time magazine with Jasmine's face circled in red ink. Taped to it was a sticky note with 5 words. "You're making it worse." Leonard, her chief of staff, didn't hesitate. He called Capitol Police immediately. Officers filled out a report, took photos, and warned them to be extra careful. Jasmine sat through it quietly. No panic, no fear on her face. Just stillness. When the officer asked how she was feeling, she simply said, "I'm not scared," Leonard replied softly. "I know, but I am." Her parents started calling more often. Not to talk about the news or the politics, just to check in, ask how she was sleeping, if she'd eaten that day. They didn't ask about the threats, but Jasmine could hear the worry in their voices. Her mom sent her photos of her niece's graduation, probably hoping it would make her smile. Her dad texted one night, just one line, "Proud of you. Be smart." The threats didn't stop. Emails filled with hate. DMs from burner accounts. Some messages were coded, but others were straight up chilling. One read, "You're not as untouchable as you think." Another said, "Remember what happens to those who speak too soon." Capitol Police started increasing patrols near her home. Leonard brought up hiring private security. Jasmine didn't argue. She just nodded and said, "Let's do it." She stayed off social media. No tweets, no videos, no public response. Not because she was hiding, but because she didn't want to feed the fire. Behind closed doors, she kept working, attending meetings, reading policy, checking in with her team. She looked calm, but everyone around her knew the weight she was carrying. Then, one night, she got a short message from Senator Elijah Brandt. He wasn't the type to reach out. Older, quiet, someone who'd been around forever but rarely picked sides. His message was only one line: "You've got more eyes on you than you think. Don't let them corner you." That was it. No emojis. No small talk, but it hit her harder than any headline. He didn't say be careful. He said don't get boxed in. That meant something. That meant he saw what was coming, and she did too. The hate, the pressure, the silence, it all had a price. But Jasmine wasn't about to fold. She wasn't just dealing with trolls. She was carrying a truth that too many people didn't want to hear, and she wasn't putting it down. Not now. 7 days after the town hall, Jasmine Crockett found herself walking into another studio, but this time, the setup was completely different. No big stage, no flashing lights, no live audience ready to cheer or gasp. Just a quiet room, with cold air, cameras on silent mode, and a single table in the center. Across from her sat Donald Trump. He was already in position, hands folded, watching her as she walked in. There was no smirk, no small talk, just that steady look. And Jasmine didn't smile either. She just sat down, adjusted her blazer, and waited. The moderator, Carla Benning, was known for staying cool under pressure. She introduced the segment as a conversation, not a clash. Something more measured. They started with the obvious. Carla played the clip from the town hall, the exact moment Trump made his comment, and Jasmine fired back. The room dimmed slightly as the video rolled. No reactions this time. Just the sound of the exchange hanging in the air. When the lights came back up, Carla turned to Jasmine first and asked, "Do you regret that moment?" Jasmine looked straight ahead. "I regret that something as simple as standing up for myself still shocks people," she said. "That the bar is so low that clarity sounds like an earthquake." Her tone was calm, not defensive. She wasn't trying to score points. She was just saying what she believed. Trump leaned forward slightly. "See, that's the problem," he said. "Everything's personal with you people. I made a comment about professionalism." "That's fair game." She took it as an attack. Without flinching, Jasmine answered, "You didn't question my work. You questioned my place." That hit different. The room didn't move, but something in the energy shifted. Trump didn't bark back like usual. He just leaned back and let out a quiet chuckle, not smug, just tired. "When you've been around politics as long as I have," he said, "you earn the right to speak freely. That's called experience." Jasmine nodded. "Once. And when you've lived in systems built to ignore you, you learn not to wait for permission. That's called survival." They moved into policy after that: crime, education, housing. Jasmine stuck to facts and numbers. Trump talked more about stories and feelings. It wasn't loud. It wasn't messy. No one shouted. Even when the topic of threats came up, Jasmine didn't use it to attack. She said, "When leaders speak carelessly, people act carelessly. Words don't vanish, they land somewhere." Trump responded quieter than before. That goes both ways. He didn't push back after that. By the end, Carla thanked them. Both. The camera zoomed in for final thoughts. Jasmine said, "Power should never excuse disrespect. And speaking plainly doesn't mean being rude, it means being clear." Trump added, "We need leaders who can take heat, not just throw it," and that was it. No applause. No headlines written in real time. Just two people who don't agree. Sharing a table, letting the silence at the end speak louder than any punchline. It didn't go viral like before. But it meant something. Something different. Something lasting. In the days that followed the second interview, something unexpected began to happen. Jasmine's moment wasn't just replayed on TV or clipped for social media. It started showing up in places no one planned for: classrooms. Teachers across the country were playing the town hall clip during civics lessons. In high schools and community colleges, students watched her response and talked about it. Some debated whether she went too far. Others said it was the first time they saw someone on TV say exactly what they were thinking. In one middle school in Milwaukee, a teacher wrote Jasmine's quote on the whiteboard: "Clarity is not disrespect." The students spent the whole period talking about what that meant. Letters started arriving, not emails, real letters. Handwritten notes from people who had never posted a tweet in their life. One came from a retired Army officer in California, who wrote, "You reminded me of a young woman I served with back in '91, quiet, sharp, and steady under pressure." Another came from a 12-year-old boy in Kansas who said, "I showed your video to my mom. She cried. I think she was proud." Some letters were just a few lines, others were pages long. Some were neat, others messy, but they all shared the same: feeling gratitude for someone who spoke the truth without yelling. Young politicians noticed too. Jasmine didn't start a movement, but she shook something loose. In committee meetings across Congress, other young representatives started speaking more boldly. They didn't change their tone, they just stopped holding back. One of them said, during a late-night budget debate, "If she can say it plain, so can we." And they did. It wasn't Jasmine's volume that made the shift. It was her control. She didn't yell, she didn't act. She spoke like someone who meant every word, and that was harder to ignore than noise. Her calm didn't soften the moment. Made it hit harder, the headlines started to fade, but the feeling didn't in churches. Classrooms, barbershops, and homes, people kept talking. Not about politics, but about being seen. About knowing when to speak up. Jasmine's words echoed longer than anyone expected, not because she went viral, but because she reminded people that real power doesn't always come from shouting. Sometimes it comes from being steady, clear, and brave when it matters most. Late at night, Jasmine sat alone in her apartment with the lights low and a glass of water on the table beside her. The noise had slowed down a bit. The cameras were gone. No one was knocking on her office door, and her phone had finally stopped buzzing every 5 minutes. She picked up one of the letters from the small pile sitting on her kitchen counter. It was from a teenage girl in Ohio who wrote, "I didn't think someone like me could speak like that in public. Now, I'm not so sure." Jasmine read it twice quietly. Without saying anything out loud, she pulled out a notebook, just a plain, beat-up one she'd used for scribbles and thoughts during long days. She flipped to an empty page and wrote slowly at the top, "My voice didn't break, so why should I?" She stared at the words for a while, not to post, not to turn into a speech. Just to remind herself. This whole thing had gotten bigger than she ever expected, but that line helped her hold on to the reason she'd spoken in the first place. She thought about the moment on stage, when Trump looked at her like she didn't belong, and how easy it would have been to stay quiet. She thought about the closed-door meetings afterward, the veiled warnings, the smiles that didn't feel real. The pressure hadn't gone away. If anything, it had grown heavier. People weren't just watching what she said now, they were waiting to see what she'd do next. And not all of them were hoping she'd succeed, but she wasn't posting. She wasn't tweeting or going live or dropping sound bites. She was just sitting in silence, letting it all settle. No PR spin, no viral follow-up. Just her, a notebook, and the weight of knowing that when you speak up, even once, people expect you to keep going. She wasn't afraid of that, but she respected it. Visibility wasn't a prize, it was a responsibility. One that didn't come with instructions. She closed the notebook, took a deep breath, and leaned back in her chair. Outside, the city kept moving. Cars passed, lights flickered in apartment windows, and the world rolled on. But inside that quiet moment, Jasmine wasn't planning how to win the next headline. She was deciding how to stay true to the reason she spoke in the first place, not for applause, but to protect something bigger: dignity. It was a quiet Tuesday evening in Duncanville, Texas. No national spotlight, no flashing cameras, no polished hosts or big production crew. Just a small community center with rows of metal chairs, a squeaky microphone, and local residents who had questions. Jasmine Crockett stood at the front, holding the mic with both hands. She wasn't wearing a bright blazer, no makeup team. Just her in front of the people who had sent her to Washington in the first place. This wasn't about headlines. It was one of the many town halls she promised to hold when she first ran. Some people had seen the viral clip. Others hadn't, but all of them had something to ask. A woman near the front, older, wearing a floral scarf, raised her hand slowly and said, "You said something to that man on TV. I've been thinking about it ever since. Were you scared?" The room got quiet. Jasmine looked at the woman, then at the rest of the room. "I wasn't scared," she said after a moment. "I was aware." She let that sit. "I wasn't afraid of him. I was aware of what happens when someone like me speaks that clearly in a room not built for me. Awareness means you understand the weight before you lift it." The room stayed still. Someone in the back clapped once, then stopped. Jasmine didn't wait for applause. She wasn't there for that. I don't want to be remembered for a comeback, she continued. I want to be remembered for consistency. That moment on TV wasn't about performance. It was about protection. Protection of something too many people get told they don't deserve dignity. A man near the wall asked, "Protecting what?" She turned toward him and said, "Protecting the right to speak without shrinking." After the event, a small group of young volunteers waited outside to talk to her. One girl, maybe 19, held a notebook full of questions. Sometimes I feel like people don't want people like me in those rooms, she said. Jasmine didn't sugarcoat it. Sometimes they don't, she replied. But those rooms don't belong to them. They belong to the people, and the people don't need perfect, they need present. Later that night, Jasmine sat by her window, staring out into the quiet. No noise, no pressure, just a moment to breathe. She took out the note she'd written weeks ago and added one last line. Let them talk, I'll keep working. Because when the mic came her way, she didn't whisper, she spoke. And now the question wasn't about her anymore. It was, for everyone watching, what will you say when the mic comes your way?